Greetings, everyone. I want to share with you another one of the interviews that I did as part of the Healing Summit, Healing Ourselves, Healing Our World, that was done in conjunction with the book launch for the book that Christina Lee and I co-authored, entitled From Trauma to Freedom, about how you can heal from trauma. This particular interview was done in April of 2021 with my dear friend, Christine Kuhlman, who is a naturopathic doctor and a very gifted healer. And we talk about what natural healing is about in terms of coming into balance and harmony within ourselves, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and what it means to come into balance and harmony in the world in this time. And we also talked about what are some of the directions that medicine and healing are likely to go into as we move into the Aquarian Age. I hope you enjoy this interview. Thank you and blessed be. So today, as part of our Healing Summit, Healing Ourselves, Healing Our World, I have the honor and privilege of introducing my dear friend, Christine Kuhlman, and one of the most gifted healers I know. So let me give you a little bit of a sense of her background, and then we'll get into our conversation together. So Chris started out in nursing in 1970 in conventional medicine, but was even then very interested in the mind, body, spirit interface. In 1976, she became the first private midwife, nurse midwife in New Hampshire, and was increasingly drawn more into natural ways of healing, including herbal medicine and then homeopathy. And then she went on to naturopathic medical school and has been a naturopathic doctor and homeopath since 1997, and is an incredibly integrative healer using many different modalities to honor the uniqueness of each person and what's going to help them come back into balance and harmony. So tell us a little bit. Well, first of all, you have a center called Cougar Sound Spirit Healing Center in North Sutton, New Hampshire. I would love it if you just talked a little bit about the name of your center and how that relates to how you heal.
Thank you. Through a wonderfully circuitous way, the precious Cougar became my right-sided guide way back in the 80s when I attended Native American healing ceremonies out in the Northwest. And after a sweat lodge, my first sweat lodge, I came out of the lodge and went to go into my tent and had just closed my eyes, and under my right eyelid was the Cougar, and under my left was another animal spirit guide. And the next morning, when I went to circle, I was asking the wonderful shaman that was teaching. His name was Sun Bear. He has passed, but an incredibly beautiful man. And I said, what was I seeing? I said, this doesn't make sense. And he said, oh my goodness. He said, you were so blessed. He said, you just got your right and your left animal spirit guides. So then I started investigating and learning about them. And all along, the Cougar has been probably the strongest animal guide, although I'm blessed with many of them. And in many Native American philosophies, the Cougar stands for the true art of responsibility, which they translate as the ability to respond to any situation, which is a much more powerful meaning of that word. And the sounds part of the name for my clinic is because one of my subspecialties is sound healing. So I wanted to bring in this beautiful animal as my main guide and also give an idea to people that there's sound therapy offered as well and that it's a healing center. It's certainly an unconventional name, and but it has such meaning to me, and so it's a delight to be able to share that meaning. Thank you for asking.
Well, and already it speaks to the number of different modalities that you blend in your work and the variety of trainings and traditions that you draw on. Can you talk a little bit more about your path as a healer?
Yeah, I started when I started in nursing. It was the height of Vietnam, and I went into the Navy Nurse Corps after college, and they helped me get through college financially. And I was stationed in Philadelphia and worked with a lot of the young men who came back as amputees and as paraplegics or quadriplegics. And it was a very painful journey. And I was so young. I didn't have the emotional maturity to really handle it and was burning out. So I asked to be transferred to obstetrics and I mean to pediatrics, and I was put in obstetrics. And I fell in love with OB. And then when I had done my payback to the Navy, I chose not to stay in and I went to nurse midwifery school. And nurse midwives have always, whether they're nurse midwives or they're professional midwives, non-nurse midwives, non-nurse midwives, we're always kind of on the border between conventional and non-conventional because whether you're delivering or attending births in the hospital or the birthing centers or home, you often bring in herbs and other modalities, and many of my patients came in using herbs or homeopathy, and I got very excited, and because I didn't learn that in my nurse midwifery program, it was all conventional theory, and it was just such a beautiful way of helping women. And I was lucky enough to my husband, who was an OBGYN at the time, he and I opened the first birthing center, freestanding birthing center in New Hampshire.
Mm.
And when that politically and economically was not able to be sustained because we had trouble finding other medical practitioners to cover us, so we could never get away. We finally had to close it, and it devastated me because I didn't want to go back just to the hospital. And I live in a rural area, and it didn't feel as safe to me to go long distances from the hospital to attend births. So I was learning more courses about homeopathy, and I was taking a class one time from a naturopathic doctor, and I had never heard of that profession before. And she knew about my excitement learning homeopathy, and she said to me, "Have you ever thought of going to naturopathic school?" And I said, "Oh, I'm old." This is Dr. Herring, whom I owe so much to. I said, "Pam, I'm really old," because at that point I was in my mid 40s, and I said, I can't leave my practice. I can't go halfway across the country and go to school." And then I just started thinking about it, and this was before I understood anything about astrology. But when you and I met at one point to do my first chart, and you told me how much Uranian energy I had in my on my ascending, it made so much sense because once I started thinking about it, I thought, my God, I have no idea how I'm going to do it financially or leave my established practice. Where do these women go? All these concerns, leaving my husband for 4 years to go to school, all of this. And then I knew I had to do it. I just knew it. And then you open up to the universe, and it turns out to be easier than you ever think. So when I graduated, I was just shy a few months of turning 50. And I was the second oldest in my class, but I just knew that I was going to still be able to have a long career. And I was so full of passion for what I learned there because even though I had grown up in the conventional world with nursing and nurse midwifery, and I have a great deal of respect for conventional world, but I felt like a lot of things were being missed or band-aided or approached from too much of a cookbook
Mm.
approach. And and that really led me into going to naturopathy too, because you have so many different ways of healing, helping people heal. And the whole premise is not looking at the person for their symptoms, or not looking at them as a cancer patient or as a patient with chronic illness, but seeing them as this beautiful individual who just happens to have certain symptoms or certain pathologies. But each one is treated from day one, ideally, as a whole mind, body, spirit individual. One of the many things that we're taught to look at, which always made sense to me, is what, first of all, who are they? What are their lives positive aspects? What are their lives negative aspects? What are their stresses? What are their joys? What are their passions? Um, and if you ask people, it's amazing. We always know, but we don't always know that we know. But to ask them, okay, you've been sick for, say, 6 years, just as an example. What was going on in your life at that time? Because nothing happens in isolation. And this is never to put blame on somebody. I don't believe for a minute that we purposely cause our own problems, our own illness, but our life contributes to it. Genetically, environmentally, socially, spiritually, job wise, all these, relationship wise, everything is all interconnected, as most of us know and appreciate. So when you ask somebody that, first of all, you're validating that they understand and that they know far more about their own bodies than we do. I think there's far too much ego in all forms of medicine. Certainly, the conventional world doesn't have all of that. The natural world has a lot of big egos too. And when you come into somebody and say, "I know what I can do for you. I know exactly what you're going to tell me, and this is the plan." If you have that kind of preset in your mind, you can't possibly. I believe you can't possibly work with somebody. They have to partner in it. If somebody says to me, "Tell me what you want me to do," I'll give them offerings, but I'll say to them, "You need to tell me what you want to do. If I ask you to do X, Y, or Z, and you say that's impossible in my lifestyle, I don't want you to leave here with my expectation that you're going to do it. We need to negotiate something else that will work in your lifestyle." And if somebody doesn't want to do the hard work of participating in their healing process, that's one of the few times I would ask somebody to really seriously consider if this type of medicine is the right choice for them. Because you all of us have to make certain changes in our life to do our healing. It can be on many levels, it can be in multiple levels, it can be in a single area. I mean, if somebody's in a tortured relationship and they have, say, hypertension, it's not a, maybe not a direct link, but it's certainly related to all the stress in that relationship. And it doesn't mean you divorce. It doesn't mean you have to do anything dramatic, although that sometimes is the outcome. But it's not something I'm going to tell them to do, but I'm going to ask them to tell me a lot about the stress in the relationship. And then if it's not already apparent, it's like this beautiful light goes off and they'll say, "Oh my God, I never thought about that." Every time my partner came in, I started to get a headache, or I started to choke up, or had my back go into spasms. And when you show that type of possible or probable association, most people are able to say, "I see that," or "I'm not sure that's real." And you say, "Okay, then tell me what you think."
Mm.
And people know, they absolutely know. And, you know, when you're sitting with someone, it's not that you can't say, "Have you thought of this or thought of that?" But I always tell people, if what I'm asking them or what I am answering to a question they have, if it doesn't feel right, they've got to tell me. I don't take that as a personal affront. I clearly don't have all the answers and never will. So it's team approach right away. yes, I appreciate the years of study. I appreciate my knowledge, but I can't possibly have all the answers. And one of the things I do is if with everyone, if they're willing to go there, is if I'm offering, after getting their history, if I'm offering something like a homeopathic remedy or herbals, um, in any form, or nutraceuticals like vitamins, etc., I have them do a form of intuitive way of knowing whether it's going to be good for them. And some people come in already having a way to instinctively, intuitively know that, and others don't. So I'll show them some variations of it. But it's often called kinesiology or muscle testing. But fairly early on in my career, I personally stopped trying to muscle test somebody else and taught them how to do it, because I feel like then my energy isn't guiding them, because I can't be totally unbiased. If I bring down 4 products and in my mind I'm thinking, I bet you this one is going to be the best one, it's wonderful for ego because you're so often wrong. And you say, oh, I really thought you were going to choose such and such. I usually don't tell them that, because then they second guess themselves. And I would say, honestly, statistically, at least 9 out of 10 times, what they've chosen is the right formula for them.
Well, part
Even
of
if all of them logically make sense, it builds their confidence. Starts, because we're all intuitive. Because so many people will say, well, I'm not intuitive, or I don't see things, or I don't. And I'll try to teach them that yes, they are, that without realizing it, they're doing things on an intuitive level all the time. I said, have you ever sensed, who's calling before you pick up the phone? Oh yeah, well that's intuition. We all do it, and I know with your beautiful work, you work with that all the time, and it's, to me, it's always been a higher way of healing when we listen to that inner truth and not second guess, because our wonderful intellect is tremendous asset for most of us, but it's such a linear or more black and white way of assessing. When we open our hearts and we open our spirits and we listen to that inner voice, so much more comes through that has so much more depth. And it also helps us when we don't have the words for it, because we so often don't have the words, especially now as we're shifting more and more into the higher dimensions. I think so many times we don't have words for what we're feeling, or how to explain how something heals spontaneously, or whatever. And people are very hungry for
mm,
different ways. I try to really respect, like I said, I don't disrespect conventional medicine. I think any form of medicine has its limitations, its positives and its limitations. I think the more we blend the best of both worlds, the more people we can help in their healing process.
and part of what you're saying, which I think differentiates naturopathic medicine from conventional medicine, and just listening to you, rather than seeing the person as a patient needing treatment, you're
Mm-hmm.
really helping them see how, in some way, their life is out of balance, or
Yes,
their disease is
exactly.
connected to some disharmony,
Mm-hmm.
and empowering them
Mm-hmm.
to listen to that deeper knowing. And I've experienced this with you and working with you. You're amazing in how you can really listen at a deep level, and how you guide people in listening to the message their body is trying to give them.
Right.
So that you're really, and my experience with you is you're really honoring the body as a messenger,
Mm-hmm.
trying to guide the person in how they can grow or heal or become more conscious of what's out of balance in their lives.
I think it's a real key, that, again, no matter what form of medicine you choose to follow, or combinations of medicine, that one of the biggest frustrations when you talk to some of the really top notch, wonderful conventional doctors and practitioners out there is when you're given 15 or 30 minutes to see somebody who comes in with a serious and chronic illness, There's no way. We take on average 2 hours with the first intake. And oftentimes we can't even finish in that. I think most naturopathic colleagues of mine that I know schedule a minimum of that. Some will schedule 3 hours, and usually an average follow up is 45 to 60 minutes because it's impossible, no matter if you're the most brilliant doctor in the world, it's impossible to get such detail when you have 15 or 20 minutes. And I think many of the doctors in the conventional world are extraordinarily frustrated by that. And some of them are breaking away from hospitals or big clinics where they don't have the potential. They're told how many patients they have to see in a day. Many of them know they can't do a good job. They're band-aiding. I think conventional medicine is still the most brilliant form of medicine if somebody has a heart attack or somebody has a major bleed, God forbid, or a compound fracture that's sticking out of, the bones or sticking out of the skin, etc. We don't have we have medicine to help that, but we don't have the technology in our world to, restart the heart, jumpstart the heart, or put that fracture together. Certainly we can help heal. So when you work together, many of my patients who decide they want to go with chemotherapy for cancer, for instance, when we share as part of their teamwork, we're able with this beautiful medicine to give them herbs and nutrients or homeopathics or do other forms of quantum energy healing to allow the chemotherapy to do its job more efficiently, and yet decrease some of the side effects that make chemotherapy by and large so difficult to tolerate.
So you really know how to bridge the worlds rather
I think
than.
they need to be bridged. Like I said, I don't think there's any one form of medicine, even some of the ancient forms like Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. They're certainly have been known to do much deeper healing than what we know in the United States. There's such ancient healing. So I think they have much more experience with doing things that we would consider impossible in our world, but they accomplished in their world. But I'm just saying, with the way a lot of us came into training or in this three-dimensional mindset, because I think the ancient people, and I'm sure most of us agree, were much closer to their intuition, were much more deeply spiritual, believed more in Gaia's ability to heal us with her herbs and the homeopathics and good food, good clean water, good sleep and air, all of these essentials. So I think the ancients, I mean, obviously people died from things that we can now save them from, but they didn't have the degree of chronic disease we have.
Mm.
Maybe they just didn't live long enough, or it was because we didn't have the pollution, we didn't have the devastation, we didn't have the level of intense stress that people live under in these days. And if we can go back to some of those ancient roots, and I think that's what we're doing, is going back to that beautiful knowledge and bringing it into the 21st century and really try and into the higher dimensions, and taking where they learned and either relearning or maybe possibly even accelerating into what they never got to do. But we can't work in isolation, neither form of medicine.
That's really beautiful. And you also were referring to how some of chronic illnesses today relate to pollution and relate to stress. And do you see some of the disease that we may experience as also related to how we're out of balance and harmony with Mother Earth, and how
Absolutely.
that's part of the message that our um, symptoms are giving us, is that we need to not only be in balance and harmony in ourselves, but with nature and with
Mhm.
Mother Earth?
Absolutely. And earlier you said one of my favorite ways of saying the word disease with a hyphen in the middle,
Mm.
because it really is a dis-ease. You're out of balance, like you're saying, you're out of harmony. And so it takes some of the onus of, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Like, say somebody comes in even with being a chronic smoker for years and develops chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or lung cancer. The worst thing in the world they can do is take the blame for that. But if they realize that all those chemicals that are in the cigarettes are so destructive, it's not the tobacco. Tobacco is a sacred plant, especially organic tobacco. It's all of the additives that have come in to addict us, and what that does to our body and causing our body to break down. But especially with the pandemic, more and more people, because they've needed to stay home, have embraced being out for walks, have embraced going out. Even if it's tarmac they're walking on, they're still on Mother Earth better than when they're in a high-rise building or whatever. And finding a reconnection. How many more people since the pandemic have made, whether it's a little backyard garden or a great big garden, or have walked in the forest. Forest walking is becoming quite a wonderful thing. I believe the beautiful Japanese philosophy has started talking, using that phrase, and it is, or forest bathing, I guess, is the term. And it's just such an appreciation. You can see it all over the world, trying to reconnect to Gaia.
Mm.
I remember one of the first lectures we ever had at naturopathic school, where they said you need basically 3 or 4 basic things. You need good sleep, you need good food, you need good water, and you need to have support in your life.
Mm. Beautiful.
And I was thinking, oh my God, that's too simple. But why does something have to be difficult to make it real? And I think that's one of the, I'm sorry if I'm skipping around too much. So if you tell me I'm
Great.
off track, let me know. I get on a roll sometimes. But I'm thinking about sometimes one of the arguments, not arguments, but one of the disagreements sometimes with conventional medicine and holistic medicine is that I think it's hard to think when you've spent a minimum past undergrad school, graduate school of 12 or more years, depending if you go into a super specialty, before you can even start to practice. It's incredibly threatening when somebody says, I can go to 4 years of medical school, and our medical schools are almost identical, the basic.
Mm.
Now, when I went through medical school, they were just starting to say that you had to do residencies, but they were not required when I graduated in the mid 90s. They are now, so you have 1 or 2 extra years after school, but it doesn't have to be, one-upmanship, because there's so much detail pushed into their heads, and medical school destroys so many doctors' health um, because of how intense it's very sadistic in many ways. Even naturopathic medical school is just very intense. How much material you have to get in your brain, and but why can't it still be the basics, and then you go out and subspecialize? So many medical doctors now are voluntarily after school going into functional medicine, which is bridges the gap
Mhm.
of holistic and natural and conventional medicine. And I think we're really very quickly moving into where it's not the exception where those two fields can talk to one another. It's going to be more of the consistency. And a lot of patients will come to me and say, I need a new family doctor, PCP. I need somebody who's at least open to what I do with you. And I can't find enough people for them, but I keep a nice little list just because I understand that. And it's always lovely when you have been able to bridge that gap with a doctor that maybe didn't feel like he or she was open to holistic medicine, and then has a discussion and realizes that you can back up what you're saying, or that you can show them what you're doing, etc. So I think it's coming. I think it's part of this overall evolution that we're in now. But medicine is definitely one of the paradigms that cannot continue in the way it's going. It's not cost effective. there's no way you can have enough people. I think one of the greatest things you can do for people is give them enough education that they can take care of themselves. Doctor, docere in Latin means teacher. I
Mm.
think it's a far better term than thinking of doctor as I'm the one that's going to take care of you. That's a terribly paternalistic
You're talking
attitude.
about more teacher, guide,
Yes,
mentor.
yes, exactly. More midwife, where you're there to guide them. They have to still do their work. If they don't want to clean up a diet that's a typical American sad diet, and they have tremendous amounts of inflammation, or they have any chronic disease, if that's that's something that's very hard for people to do, and I honor that because it's no easier for me to eat clean, and I don't do it perfectly all the time anyway, but I understand that we can't give up eating. But if we choose to constantly eat highly processed foods and too much sugar and too much alcohol, how can you expect your body to be healthy with that? There's no nutritional value, or minimal nutritional value. So it's one of the things, and discussing diet cannot be done in 5 minutes. And until very recently, the conventional medical school spent no time on it. We had 4 years of nutrition.
Wow.
Plus, I had nutrition as a nurse, because nurses have always had nutrition in their schools. So it's a process, certainly, but
I also loved your description of the process being about, the metaphor of a midwife, that you're also guiding people through this time of transition or transformation, that the illness is coming as a messenger for some kind of change.
Mhm. And today we rarely, one of the more difficult things about practicing holistic medicine in this specific time is that we have, at least in the United States, more so than many of the other countries, we have severely chronically ill people. And they usually come, unless they've grown up with some holistic concepts, or on their own have read things and directed themselves early on in the process. Most of the people we see have failed I'll rephrase that. Conventional medicine has failed them. And then they're incredibly sick by the time they come. So one of the first things you talk with them about is, when they say, how long will it be before I get better? First of all, you can't tell them an exact amount, but you say, how long have you been sick? So if
Mm.
somebody's had symptoms for 6 or 7 years, you hope in the first month or two there's enough healing that they get excited about it, and are willing to participate in the work of healing. But no way in the world are you going to turn that around in a couple of months. So most of the time we say to people, you're not looking a year for a year, but you're looking for at least 50% of the time that you were ill to
Mm.
heal. And some things can't be healed, so we can't always talk the word cure. But if
Mm.
somebody, even somebody that I've had the privilege of working in my more recent years with a lot of terminally ill patients, sometimes they survive, sometimes they don't. But when they are ready for the final journey, um, they have healed many aspects of themselves. So have they healed? I feel very strongly, and I know you believe this too. Of course they have. They didn't survive in this physical world because, for whatever universal reason, it was their time to pass through the veils, but they have healed a tremendous amount. They've come more to peace with themselves. They've resolved traumas to a certain degree. They've done a lot of work, but the body can only tolerate so much damage before it's worn out. But their soul and spirit,
And I think you're
ready.
also differentiating healing from cure.
Right.
And you
So,
also, I mean, one of the things that I really honor in your work is your deep understanding of the death transition also, that death is a part of life. So death
absolutely.
isn't a failure, it's an yet another transition and time
It's
of
another
transition.
journey. Right. Right. Yeah, I've done some work with learning through many courses to be a death doula, which is like a death midwife, if
Mm,
you will. And there are definitely professional death doulas, and it's an incredible thing to. It's an incredible honor to me. It's like full circle of coming in my younger years, helping these beautiful babies to come into the world, and now the universe is just bringing more people to me that are near their transitional time, and I don't get to be with all of them when they pass, but when I'm able to be present, it's an incredible honor,
mm,
and you learn so much from each person's passing. And I think it's another thing that in our culture we don't tend to do death well.
that's right.
So many more ancient cultures honor that transition, and people always have family. And in this country, we, especially now with the pandemic, it breaks my heart that so many people are dying alone because they can't come into a nursing home and see their loved ones or whatever. I think it's something we'll look back at and think, oh my God, this was terrible.
What is, as a naturopathic doctor, what is your understanding of COVID-19 and what this pandemic is about?
I don't know if I can't say that it's necessarily something that as a national organization we've of naturopathic doctors that we have, we've talked a lot about it as far as what we can do to help people build up their immune system and have natural ability to minimize symptoms when they come, and hopefully not have to die from it. But we don't, I don't think we have an absolute consensus on what the meaning is. I can tell you what I think, but it doesn't, I'm not speaking for my
Yeah,
profession
yeah,
necessarily.
I'm interested in your intuitive sense.
Well, I think, and you and I have talked about this, I think there's a number of issues. I think that the universe is sending us this not to destroy us, although that's a possible way we can choose to do, but not to destroy the human race, even making it a worldwide invasion of a potentially pathological infection. I think it's here to tell us how out of balance we are with the natural world, where for too many centuries we've been the supreme kingdom. And anything we wanted, we took from Gaia
Mm.
without the sensitivity to always replace it or make sure the other species had equal access to the resources that the world had gifted us at one time. And I mean, this has been a problem for so many centuries, but I think we've escalated it so dramatically in the last 15, 20, 30 years. It's just so dramatic with the amount of poisons that are in our environment, in our air, our water, and the total disrespect for how many species we're dishonoring by letting them become extinct because of our greed for how much land we need. And I'm talking from the majestic elephants to the insect population. And I listened recently to a beautiful video that was Deepak Chopra and Sadhguru speaking for 11 minutes. They made more sense than I think anything else I've heard about this pandemic. And really saying, people have to realize we're more than 90% viruses and bacteria. And here we have a virus. They're so intelligent for such a microscopic organism coming in, and what are we doing? We're saying, oh my God, what can we do to kill? Not what can we do to change our way of living? What can we do to kill? It's that old black and white. I'm the strong, um, in most cases, Caucasian, coming into saying, you are not going to screw up my world. You are not going to adversely affect my world. So I'm going to come and I'm going to kill you as fast as I can, not realizing there's no way to do that because they're mutating faster than we could possibly take them out. And for those first few weeks, I think everybody was astounded back last spring when the lockdowns started happening all over the world, how fast Gaia was healing.
Right.
You know, whether it was in a third world country, and like the Himalayan air was clearing and they could see the top of the Himalayas, you know, rivers were clearing, soil was coming back to life, all of these things. And we had hardly done anything but stopped our greed for this
And
carbon
the
footprint.
destruction.
How much can we eat? How much can we buy? How much gasoline, how much fossil fuel we can use. And nobody wants to continue to live restricted the way we are now. But if we just go for these vaccines and this concept, I'm not saying the vaccines are right or wrong. I'm just saying, unless we do other things besides this, we don't have a prayer.
Well, part of what you're saying that feels so profound is that our natural, you know, modern Western cultural approach is a war on this, a war on
Exactly.
drugs, a war on
Right.
COVID-19.
Everything is that way. Mhm.
And it's taking this domineering, aggressive approach
Mhm.
rather than, and this I think is part of what's so profound in the more natural approach to healing that you use, which is what's out of balance here.
Right.
How, you know, how do we take the message of this virus to
Mhm.
wake us up to see where we're out of balance as humanity and what we need to change? And as you and I've talked about, this is such a powerful time of transition astrologically.
Mhm.
We're needing to change our paradigms and our ways of being, and particularly that sense of separation
Mhm.
from the species around us and our
Right.
relationship with Gaia.
Until we rekindle what the ancients knew automatically without any schooling. They knew the interconnectedness of everything
Yeah.
and how we're all equal. I mean, are we going to literally allow ourselves as a species, as a kingdom, to disappear from this beautiful planet because we have the arrogance to think that a virus can't take us out? It certainly can. And why is every living being, animals, plants, bacteria, why are the viruses so prevalent in our world? They can be in balance or they can be out of balance, because we certainly, if we're 90 some odd percent virus and bacteria, it's not all pathologic
Mm.
virus and bacteria. We have our own, when our immune system is healthy, it's such a big key. We have our own way of having it's like a probiotic. You know, we have our own pro health viruses and pro health bacteria in our bodies to say, oh boy, this particular virus is getting a little bit too heavy in your system. We're going to come in and we're going to rebalance that.
Mm.
But instead of looking at, because they understand this, the conventional world understands the science behind all of this, but it's not necessarily a fast approach. From day one, anytime we said as holistic providers to people, it's quite simple. Take care of your immune system. Unless you you're either extremely elderly, whatever definition you want for that, or you have multiple serious comorbidities or serious medical conditions in your body. Most people in this country will not ever die of COVIDs. They
Mm.
might get sick. They may never know they've had it. And that's what the vast majority of people have experienced, is somebody's tested them positive because they've gone in because they've been exposed and they never knew they had it because they were fine. It's the ones who are already very sick or very elderly that don't have an immune system that can support them, that yes, this virus has an increased risk of taking them out.
That
And that
makes
happens every year with the flu, but we don't talk about those statistics. We don't talk about how many people die from the common flu every year. But every year it's a different virus. It's a different, so that's why one of the many reasons they have a new flu vaccine all the time. But it's not like, if you just do so much vitamin C or so much zinc or eat less sugar or exercise more, get fresh air, get better sleep, don't stay up so late, stay away from as much stress as you possibly can, that there's no guarantee to say you won't get very sick. So I have a lot of respect for this virus. I don't tell people to just ignore it, but at the same token, one of the things that's destroying so many people's immune system is all the fear, because
Mm,
our government and other governments in the
right.
world, but I think the United States approach has been so fear laden and so paternalistic. Wait, we'll come out with a vaccine. We'll take care of you. But meanwhile, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. In areas that may not have had to be so restrictive because either they didn't want to believe that if we took better care of ourselves and self-restricted ourselves, that we could improve our immune systems enough. And when I tell people, if they or teach people, if they don't understand how critical stress is to our immune system, then they don't get why it's, besides the discomfort of being in a fear state. But since the pandemic started, one of the first things most people come in with is so much anxiety that I'll spend a good deal of the visit just trying to get them back into their bodies again and finding ways to deal with that, because I worry about people even getting the vaccine if they're in a fear state. So that something that should be helping them may not, it may go the opposite way if it's done under fear.
Good point.
Or a belief that the big government is going to help us. I'm not anti-government at all, but that, yes, the government has a lot of power and money, but they don't know us as individuals.
Well, and again, so much of what you've talked about is how we need to be empowered to be in balance in
Absolutely.
ourselves and,
Absolutely.
you know, really strengthening our own immunity
Mhm.
and really looking at how we're in harmony or out of harmony.
Mhm.
Let me, I could
Mhm.
talk to you for hours, but let me ask
Sorry,
you
yeah.
one last
Mhm.
question. Assuming that we can begin to become more conscious
Mhm.
and come back more into that empowerment and understanding how to be in balance and how to be back in right relationship with
Mhm.
the earth, what do you project could be the medicine or healing of the future? Because I know, I mean, you mentioned quantum healing
Mhm.
before. I know that you very much incorporate working at the energetic level
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah.
So what's your sense of how things
I
might
can tell
progress?
you my dream, but I really feel that it's what one of the ways the universe is guiding us if we're open to it. And again, I think we may still have to have a lot of the basics in the world, but if more people, I think we're going both in conventional and clearly very rapidly in holistic medicine, going into more and more of energy healing and less substance,
Mm,
and teaching people so many of our energetic ways of healing. We can teach people. We can teach people how to meditate. We can teach people how this relatively incorporation in a relatively new form that for me it's a form I've just recently bringing into my practice of quantum healing. I mean, I offer people homeopathy, and homeopathy is quantum. There's no substance in it, but beauty. It's all energy, and it works if you get the right remedy. I mean, that's makes sense. You can't just use any remedy. Um, but so that's been an ancient form of quantum healing. Acupuncture is a form of quantum healing. Reiki, prayer clearly is quantum healing. I do a form of, I've been blessed to have been taught by somebody that that taught me sound healing. And when I first started learning, I thought, I know this.
wow.
I know this. I remember the first treatment I got, and I sat up in the middle. In fact, I pushed off accidentally a Tibet. Thank God it wasn't a crystal ball; it was a Tibetan bowl on my abdomen. And I just sat up, and I said to this beautiful woman, I said, "Oh my God, I've done this before." And we had just met, and we both started laughing. And she said, "How do you know?" I said, "I have no clue how I know, but I've done this before." And I had this vision of this glass table and a bunch of people standing around with singing bowls and chimes and everything, and somebody being on the table healing, being healed with sound. And we know
Mhm.
sound is one of the most ancient healing things. And as a
Sound and
midwife, I
light.
would always tell my wonderful women that patients that, the first sense that that baby has in utero is
Mhm.
hearing.
Right.
4 to 6 weeks they can hear. And it's usually our
One of the
last
last
sense.
sentences to
It
go, isn't
is,
it?
unless you've lost your hearing. And why they always tell us to talk to people even if they're in a coma as they're journeying through the veils. So anyway, so I do a form of sound healing where working with the planetary sounds, which are just so exquisite, and balancing that with some sacred geometry where you're accessing the Chinese meridians and the chakras. So you're working the auric and the etheric fields minimally. I think we're using more outer bodies than that, but at least we have data on those two outer bodies. And so most people love it. Some people fall asleep. I've had people snoring on the table. It doesn't matter. It goes in, and children love it as well. And then work with some Pleiadian, ancient Toltec wisdom from a wonderful feminine lineage that dates that far back, of bringing in the Pleiades and our sun and a mountain or mountain group of people's choices, the earth and the underworld, and accessing different areas of the body that you just hold for different meaning, like healing for yourself, healing your lineage. Um, so energetically, you can change your DNA, and energetically, you can help beings in your family lineage that have gone before you let go, cutting the cords, so to speak, of some of these diseases, or whether they're mind, body, or spirit illnesses that they may not have to carry into the next reincarnation, depending on your belief system. So much of this can be taught to people, and the form of quantum healing I've just learned, or I'm in the process of learning because it's always a journey. You can teach somebody within minutes how to bring up their own heart chakra energy and start focusing on anything that brings in the concept of unconditional love to them, whether it's a spiritual guide, whether it's a loved one, whether it's an animal, whether it's some beautiful scene in nature, whatever it is, and it can be different visions at different times. And you can heal yourself by bringing out others. You can do long distance healing. But I just had a gentleman come in yesterday who had been in an accident and had I think it's pretty severe, torn rotator cuff. He could just barely move his arm more than a few inches. So he had no real range of motion. And he was getting conventional medicine as well, which was necessary for diagnosis as well as physical therapy and things. But he came to me, he'd been with me for a while, and he said, I just wanted to come and see if there's anything you could do to help me regain some range of motion quicker than what I'm being told, and to help me with the pain. So we worked with he wound up leaving with some arnica gel, and arnica is a homeopathic remedy in this case, or a form, because arnica exists as a plant as well, but it was in the homeopathic form, as well as some high potency arnica pellets and a few other things. And then I said, would you be open to doing some quantum healing? And his wife was with him, and it was the first time I had met her. And I'm thinking, oh dear, this is real woo-woo stuff here. I hope that she's going to be okay about it. And I'm not saying that to put it down at all. I believe in it entirely, but I don't know how to explain it. And she was wonderfully gracious, and we sat down, the three of us together, and I said, just relax. And I said, you can have your eyes open or closed. And all I did was just quietly sit there, because it wasn't me, it was the universe coming through. But I sat there and just meditated on opening my heart chakra three-dimensionally, and bringing in something that brought in unconditional love from my standpoint. And then I focused on the inhalation, to focus the energy on healing his shoulder completely, without knowing exactly what was torn. It was a soft tissue injury, but not knowing exactly. And then on the exhalation, you breathe out gratitude, and you're doing the breathing very slowly, like in breath to 4 or 5 count, and an out breath of 4 to 5. And you just keep bringing this just. It's always the simple things that work the best. That keep bringing in this beautiful concept of unconditional love, healing, and exhaling back to the universe your gratitude, and literally on most of the time it takes 3 to 5 minutes. I could have been touching him. Some of the literature I'm reading is suggesting that you don't have to, and that sometimes, even if your intent is as pure as possible, sometimes I think when we get into somebody's energy field, it can slow down their healing because they're almost relying consciously or unconsciously on your doing some of their healing. And some people aren't comfortable with touch. If somebody had asked me, I'm very comfortable to touch. But at this point, because he was in so much discomfort, I decided not to. He was sitting just a short distance, maybe 6 or 7 feet away from me, but I could see him out of the corner of my eyes. And I watched him, it was his right arm, and I watched him suddenly go from not being able to move it more than an inch or two. It was like he was being held like a marionette, like a puppet. And
Wow.
I saw his arms start to go up, and then it would go down, and then it would go up more, and then it would go down. And by the time he reached it almost entirely um, uh, at a 90-degree angle to his shoulder, he couldn't reach it up over his head, but he wasn't able to move it at all when he walked in. It couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. So I stopped where I was and I said, I'm seeing you move your arm. I said, are you in pain? He said, oh my God, I'm not in pain. And I saw a little frown on his face every time his hand would move. And it was like he wasn't believing. And this man is open, very open to holistic healing, and he's a healer in his own right. I'd like to stop here. I think we all are healers. I don't think you have to have
Mm.
certain initials after your name or anything. We can all potentially heal Gaia and ourselves and our animals and plants, if in minerals, everything, the fungi, if we are open to it.
Ah,
It's
so
not hard, it's simple if we're open, especially with this quantum type of healing. um, but in any case, he thought that was enough for that day, and I agreed with him because I didn't want to have him overstretch. But I didn't tell him to do that. All I asked him to do, because I didn't think he could. And I didn't come with any, I just wanted to send this light and love and healing from the universe to him, and know that the universe was going to do whatever it needed. It wasn't, I don't, I mean, you want to be an open vessel, but it wasn't me healing him. It was the love, the unconditional love. And I think that's what has been perhaps demeaned in our society, that or so many of us have never been loved unconditionally, so we can't conceive of that. The universe knows it, the animals know it intuitively, the plants know it. Anybody can open the book on, what is his name? A beautiful Japanese man who did the studies on water. I'm blocking his name right now.
right, right.
But how the water crystals changed when words of hate went in and when words of unconditional love were spoken, or just the word love, and how the crystals of water changed. That's what's happening in our body. This is whether we want to call it quantum healing or not, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's unconditional love.
That is so beautiful. And what you're also saying is if we can allow ourselves to open to that
Right,
unconditional love,
right,
we can heal, and then we can also be
right.
channels of that,
Heal
help
others.
the
Right,
healing of
right.
the planet.
How
Thank
many wonderful beings are learning Reiki and all these other types of things, or any prayer, whether it's a structured religion or a non-structured religion, any form of prayer. All of this is quantum healing. So we all can do it. We don't have to spend years and years and years to learn. And I think the universe is saying there isn't time.
the time is now.
And if we just, can you imagine what could happen? And I'll close on this, but can you imagine what could happen if we could send unconditional love to COVID, to this form of the SARS-CoV virus that we have right now, instead of being inoculated, or maybe in addition, whatever people's
And
beliefs
instead of
are.
trying to attack it and kill it.
Right, right. To send it love, to say, we're learning, we're gonna make changes. You don't have to destroy our world.
Oh, beautiful,
Pretty simple.
beautiful, Chris.
Really. Oh,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank
Can
you.
you tell people how they can be in touch with you? I will also post this below the video, but can you tell people how they could be in touch with you?
Yes, I'd say the easiest way to start, if somebody is interested, to talk about these ways, or find, I might be able to refer them to other people closer to them, etc. Be more than happy to do that, as well, because we all, naturopaths are probably one of the most eclectic forms of healers that I know, but it's all magical, beautiful stuff. Um, my website is Cougar Sound Spirits, it's plural, for the spirits, healingcenter.com. And
Okay,
then it gives more access to a phone number and fax and that kind of thing if people want to access it. But
beautiful. Well,
thank you for
thank
helping honor this form of medicine. And I think the more of us work in teams, like my sending people to you for your wonderful wisdom and the incredible power of understanding the astrology in their lives and how the heavens demonstrate what's happening in their own lives and vice versa. Um, all of if more of us continue to work with team approach and respect for what each of us is able to give, because no one person can help everyone. It's impossible.
Well, and that is the paradigm of the Aquarian age we're moving into. So
Right, right.
creativity and collaboration.
Mhm. Thank you
Thank you,
again for allowing
Christine.
me to be part of this wonderful summit.
Oh, thank you. All
Okay.
right.